Today I am the richest man in the world. I'm considered one of the most powerful and important leaders of our era, someone whose decisions can change the course of humanity's future. My name is Elon Musk, and I'm going to tell you my whole story. Not just the victories you see in the headlines, but what really happened behind the scenes. I'm going to take you from my difficult childhood in South Africa to commanding the most innovative companies on earth. I'm going to tell you about the moments I was on the brink of bankruptcy, the humiliating failures, and the insane risks that almost cost me everything. This is my life, told by me. I was born in Pretoria, South Africa on June 28, 1971. If you look at photos from that time, you'll see a blonde boy with a distant look, almost always lost in thought. My mother, Mai, usually says that when I was very little, she thought I was deaf. I wouldn't respond when they called me. Doctors even removed my adenoids thinking that would solve the hearing problem. But the truth was something else. It wasn't a problem with my ears. It was a processing problem, or rather, an advantage. When I focused, the outside world simply ceased to exist. It was as if my brain were a graphics card, dedicated to a single heavy task, and the rest of the system ran in the background. I would lock myself in an internal visual bubble. While other kids were playing tag, I was simulating rockets or structures in my mind. Growing up in South Africa in the 70s and 80s was no walk in the park. I wasn't the popular kid, far from it. I was the nerd, the know-it-all who corrected adults when they said something factually incorrect. You can imagine how much that annoyed people. "The moon is 1,000,000 miles away," one of my relatives said at a dinner. "Actually," I interrupted, unable to stop myself, "the average distance is about 238 to 255 miles. It varies depending on the perigee and apogee." The silence at the table was awkward. I didn't do it to be mean. I just thought the truth mattered more than social etiquette. This social inability cost me dearly. School was a war zone. I was the youngest and smallest in my class, and gangs of bullies hunted me. That is not an exaggeration. They hunted me. There was a day that marked my physical and emotional memory forever. I was sitting at the top of a staircase at school, eating my lunch, trying to be invisible. Suddenly, I felt a violent shove. A kid had hidden and kicked me in the back. I tumbled down the stairs step by step, banging my head, my elbows, my ribs. When I hit the ground, stunned and in pain, I thought it was over, but it wasn't. They came down. The leader of the group grabbed my head and started smashing it against the concrete floor repeatedly. I blacked out. I woke up in the hospital, my face swollen like a ball. I had to have nose surgery years later to fix the damage from that day. But the physical pain wasn't the worst part. The worst part was going back home. Many people romanticize the father figure. I can't do that. My father, Elon Musk, is a brilliant engineer. He has an extremely high IQ and taught me incredible things about electricity, construction, and how things work physically. But he was complicated. It's hard to put into words. He was capable of making life miserable. I remember coming back from school, bruised, needing comfort, and being forced to sit and listen for hours about how I was to blame. "You are useless, Elon. You are pathetic," he would say, with a calm and terrible voice. "You will never be anything." He played mind games. He could take any good situation and turn it bad. He was verbally abusive in a way that broke anyone's spirit. I cried. I shook, but there was no escape in that house. My mom, May, divorced him when I was about 10, and for a while, my brother Kimball and I felt sorry for him. He seemed so lonely. We moved into his house. It was a mistake that taught me to survive under extreme psychological pressure, but a mistake nonetheless. My refugees were two things: books and later computers. I read the entire Encyclopedia Britannica at 9 years old, not because someone forced me, but because I needed to know. I was afraid of the dark when I was a kid, until I read about what the dark actually was. Just the absence of photons in a visible wavelength of 400 to 700 nanometers. I thought, well, it's stupid to be afraid of a lack of photons, and I was never afraid of the dark again. Science fiction was my salvation. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams shaped my philosophy more than any traditional philosophy book. The book taught that the hardest part is asking the right question. If you know what the question is, the answer is easy. The universe is the answer. We just need to figure out what questions to ask to understand it. Isaac Asimov and his Foundation series taught me that civilizations have cycles, that technology can save humanity from the dark ages. I started to feel from very early on a sort of personal responsibility for the fate of humanity. It might sound arrogant for a 12-year-old kid, but it was genuine. Then I saw a computer for the first time, a Commodore VIC-20. It had 5 kilobytes of memory. To me, it was the most amazing thing that had ever existed. I could program reality in there. I learned BASIC in 3 days. The manual said it would take 6 months. At 12, I created a video game called Blastar. It was a simple game, inspired by Space Invaders, where you had to destroy an alien ship carrying hydrogen bombs. I sold the source code to a magazine called PC and Office Technology for $500. It was my first business. Right there, I realized that technology could be converted into resources, but South Africa was getting small and dangerous. Apartheid was at its peak, and military service was mandatory. I had zero interest in serving in a fascist army to oppress black people. Besides, I knew where the future was happening, the United States of America. America was the place where the impossible happened. My mother was born in Canada, which meant I could get Canadian citizenship, and from there, it would be easier to get to the US. At 17, I made the decision. I packed my bags. My father, of course, didn't make it easy. "You'll be back in 3 months, he said, mocking me. "You will fail. You can't live without me." Those words were fuel. I got on a plane alone, with little money in my pocket and a suitcase full of books. I landed in Montreal and went to the house of distant relatives I didn't even know properly. Suddenly, I was on the other side of the world. Life in Canada was a physical endurance test. I didn't have the easy life people imagine. I worked on cousins' farms in Saskatchewan. I picked vegetables, shoveled grain silos, but the worst job was at the lumber mill in Vancouver. I was responsible for cleaning the boiler room. "Listen here, kid," the foreman said on my first day, handing me a protective suit and a mask. "You have to go into that narrow tunnel, crawl to the boiler, and shovel out the sand and superheated mulch. If you stay in there for more than 30 minutes, you cook. Understood?" It was a dangerous job. It paid $18 an hour, which was a lot at the time, but the risk was real. No one else wanted to do it. I did. I learned that the capacity to suffer and work hard is a competitive advantage. If you can handle more pain than the other guy, you win. I got into Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario. That was where I started to understand the power of connections and intellectual ambition. But my target was still the US. 2 years later, I got a transfer to the University of Pennsylvania, UPenn, with a partial scholarship. UPenn was where my mind really crystallized what I would do with my life. I didn't just want to make money. I wanted to be involved in things that would change the world. I was studying physics and economics at the Wharton School simultaneously. Physics to learn how the universe works, first principles, and economics to learn how the human world works, resource allocation. I remember lying in the dorm, looking at the ceiling and listing the 5 things that would most affect the future of humanity. 1. The internet. 2. Sustainable energy. 3. Space exploration, making life multiplanetary. 4. Artificial intelligence. 5. Reprogramming the human genetic code. I decided to focus on the first 3. In the summer of 1994, I did an internship in Silicon Valley. During the day, I worked at an ultracapacitor company, think super powerful batteries, and at night at a video game company. That was when I saw the internet exploding. Netscape was emerging. I felt the wave coming. It was now or never. I was accepted into a PhD program at Stanford to study high-energy density physics materials. It was the academic dream. I arrived in California, drove to campus, and quit 2 days later. I called the department chair. "Look, I think I'm going to defer for a while. I have an idea for an internet company." "All right, Elon," he said, "but I hope you come back." I never went back. The idea was simple. Put the business directory on the internet with maps. Today it seems obvious, like Google Maps, but in 1995 no one knew where to find a pizza place online. The yellow pages were giant physical books. I wanted to digitize that. I called my brother Kimball, who came from Canada, to join me. We founded Global Link Information Network, which later became Zip2. If you think starting a company is glamorous, let me tell you what our life was like. We had no money. We rented a tiny office in Palo Alto. We had no money for an apartment, so we slept in the office. "Elon, this is insane," Kimball told me one night, looking at the dirty futons on the floor. "It's not insane. It's necessary," I replied, typing furiously. We had a single computer. The server ran the site during the day, which meant I couldn't program, so the site was online from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. When everyone left, I sat in front of the machine and programmed all night long, sleeping 3 or 4 hours on a beanbag next to the desk. We showered at the YMCA a few blocks away. It was humiliating and exhausting. We ate cheap fast food. I asked the employees to kick me, literally, to wake me up if I passed out on the keyboard. I was the CEO, the CTO, and the janitor. I coded in C++, writing the vector mapping software from scratch. I tried to sell the idea to newspaper owners and local businesses. I walked into meetings looking like a homeless kid, trying to convince middle-aged executives that the internet wasn't a passing fad. The internet? A newspaper owner laughed in my face. "No one is going to read news on a computer screen, kid. Paper is eternal." They were wrong. And we proved it. Little by little, we got contracts. The New York Times and the Chicago Tribune signed with us. The company grew, but with growth came the loss of control. Venture capitalists, VCs, came in, and as is common in the Valley, pushed me out of the CEO role. They thought I didn't have management experience. Maybe they were right at the time. I was too intense, too focused on engineering, and not enough on people, but it hurt. In 1999, at the height of the dot-com bubble, computer manufacturer Compaq made an offer to buy Zip2. They offered $307 million in cash. I was 27 years old. My share of the deal was 7%, which meant about $22 million. I remember the day the money hit the account. Kimball and I were at a cafe. "Dude, we're millionaires," Kimball whispered, staring at the balance on the ATM. "Yeah," I said, but my mind was no longer there. I bought a 1,600 square foot condo, renovated it, and bought a car I'd dreamed of since I was a kid, a McLaren F1, the fastest car in the world at the time. It cost $1 million. It was silver, beautiful, a mechanical beast. There was a famous moment when CNN came to interview me. I was taking delivery of the car. My fiancée at the time, Justine, was there. I looked like a kid who had just won the lottery, in suits that were too big for my skinny frame. "What are you going to do now?" the reporter asked. I looked at the camera with that crooked smile of someone who knows something others don't. I could buy an island and drink daiquiris for the rest of my life, I thought. But the truth is, money for me was never the end goal. It was the tool. I looked at the banking system. It was slow, archaic, full of fees. Moving money took days. Why couldn't we send money as easily as we sent an email? While everyone celebrated the sale of Zip2, I was already drafting the next plan. I was going to take almost everything I earned, almost all of my $22 million, and bet it all again on an even crazier idea. An idea called X.com. But I had no idea that I was about to enter the hardest period of my professional life so far. I was about to enter a corporate war, be fired from my own company during my honeymoon, and almost die of malaria. I had $22 million in my pocket. For most people, that's game over. You beat capitalism. Go play golf. But I looked at the banking sector and saw dinosaurs. Banks were slow, bureaucratic, and stupid. I knew that if we could digitize real money, we would change the global economy. So I did something my advisors called madness. I took $12 million, more than half of my net worth, and founded X.com. The name was cool, right? X.com. Short, mysterious. But the business was brutal. We created the first federally insured online bank. People could send money via email. That was revolutionary in 1999. But we weren't alone. Across the street in Palo Alto, in a building almost next door, there was a startup called Confinity, led by two brilliant guys, Max Levchin and Peter Thiel. They had a product called PayPal, focused on payments via Palm Pilots. Does anyone remember those? A nuclear war began. We gave $20 to anyone who signed up. They gave 20. We gave 10 for referrals. They gave 10. We were burning money like it was newspaper in a bonfire. I worked 20 hours a day. Peter worked 20 hours a day. We knew that at that pace, both would die before the finish line. In March 2000, we decided on a truce, a merger. We united XCOM with Confinity. We kept the name XCOM because I loved the brand, but the core product became PayPal. That was when things got tense. Peter Thiel and I are friends today, but back then we were like oil and water mixed in a blender on max power. There was a deep cultural divide. His team used Linux, Unix, open source software. I wanted to use the Microsoft platform, Windows NT, because I thought it was easier to iterate and develop quickly. Sounds like a silly tech argument, right? Linux versus Microsoft. But in Silicon Valley, that is a religious war. His team hated me. They thought I was a micromanager who didn't understand elegant code. I thought they were purists who didn't understand business. And then there was the coup. September 2000. I had just married Justine. We were exhausted. I hadn't taken a vacation in years. We planned a honeymoon to Sydney, Australia to see the Olympics. "Come on, Elon, the company is stable. Take a few days," the board members said. I believed them. I got on the plane with Justine. While I was flying over the Pacific Ocean with no internet and no communication, the company board met secretly in Palo Alto. Led by Peter Thiel and supported by Max Levchin, they voted to oust me as CEO. They wanted Peter in charge. When I landed in Australia and turned on my phone, the bomb exploded. I was no longer the boss of the company I founded and funded. Imagine the scene. You are on your honeymoon on the other side of the world, and you find out your friends stabbed you in the back. I caught the first flight back. I tried to fight. I tried to convince the board to reverse the decision, but I realized something important. If I kept fighting, the company would break. The internal brawl would destroy PayPal. And I had a lot of money invested there. My ego said, destroy them. My logic said, swallow your pride and let them make money for you. I backed down. I accepted the role of advisor and let Peter lead. It was one of the most mature and difficult decisions I've ever made, and ironically, it saved my fortune. But life has a funny way of kicking you when you're already down. With free time, I decided to take a real vacation. I went to Brazil and then to South Africa. In January 2001, I visited a game reserve near the border with Mozambique. I returned to California feeling bad, really bad. I was cold sweating, shaking, hallucinating. I went to the doctor. "It's viral meningitis," he said. "Take some meds and rest." He was wrong. I was getting worse. I was dying. Luckily, a visiting doctor specializing in infectious diseases passed by my bed, looked at my charts and yelled, "This man has falciparum malaria. He needs intravenous doxycycline now or he'll be dead tomorrow." Falciparum malaria is the most lethal form. It was eating my red blood cells and clogging my organs. I was in the ICU for 10 days. I lost 45 pounds. I became skeletal, weak, on the brink of death. It took me 6 months to fully recover. The lesson I took from that: vacations will kill you. I never took a long vacation again after that. Work is safe. Leisure is dangerous. While I was recovering, PayPal took off. In 2002, eBay made an offer we couldn't refuse, $1.5 billion. As the largest shareholder, I walked away with about $180 million after taxes. So there we were. In 2002, I was 31. I had $180 million in the bank. I had everything. I could have retired. I could have become an angel investor and spent the rest of my life lunching at expensive restaurants and giving advice on other people's companies. But I was bored and I was worried. I always asked myself, where are the spaceships? When I was a kid, I watched Star Trek in 2001, A Space Odyssey. The promise was that by 2001, we would have bases on the moon and be going to Mars. But it was 2001 and NASA was stuck in low Earth orbit with the space shuttle, which was old and dangerous. I went to the NASA website. I looked for the Mission to Mars section. I found nothing. I thought it was a website error. I looked deeper. Nothing. There was no plan, there was no timeline. Humanity had given up on going further. That hit me like a punch in the gut. If we don't go to the stars, we will be trapped here until some asteroid or a nuclear war wipes us out. We need a backup for humanity. I had a crazy idea. Mars Oasis. I wanted to send a small robotic greenhouse to the surface of Mars with seeds and nutrient gel. It would land, take a photo of a green plant growing against the red landscape, and send it back to Earth. The image would be so powerful that it would reignite public interest and Congress would give NASA more money. But I needed a rocket. American rockets, Delta, Atlas, were too expensive. They cost 60, 100 million per launch. My total budget was 20 or 30 million. So I looked to Russia. They had old intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, that could be converted. I went to Moscow 3 times. Me, Jim Cantrell and Adeo Resi. Picture the scene. Russian winter, grey buildings, vodka, and meetings in rooms filled with cigarette smoke with generals and engineers who looked at me like I was some rich idiot tourist. "We want to buy 2 Dnieper rockets," I said, at a lunch where vodka flowed like water. "How much do you have, kid?" one of the Russians asked. They didn't take me seriously. On the 3rd trip, the head of the Russian Space Agency looked at me and said, $8 million per rocket. 8? I thought it was 8 for 2, I replied. He laughed. "Young man, you don't have the money? Go home and play." He practically spat on me. I left that meeting furious. Jim Cantrell and Mike Griffin, who was with me, were in the car, consoling me. "Forget it, Elon. These guys are impossible. Let's try something else." We got on the plane back to the US. I sat in my seat and opened my laptop. I started doing the math, spreadsheets, basic physics formulas, Tsiolkovsky's rocket equation. "Hey, look at this." I showed the spreadsheet to Cantrell. "What is that?" he asked. I calculated the cost of materials: aluminum, titanium, copper, carbon fiber, the fuel cost. The material cost of a rocket is only 2% of the sale price. The rest is bureaucratic inefficiency and defense contractors' profit margins. I looked at them with shining eyes. "We don't need the Russians. We can build the rocket ourselves." They thought I was crazy. "Elon, you're a software guy. You know nothing about rockets. You're going to lose all your money." But I had already decided. In June 2002, I founded Space Exploration Technologies Corp., or as you know it, SpaceX. I didn't just hire engineers, I hired the renegades. I went after the best talent from TRW and Boeing, guys who were frustrated because their bosses wouldn't let them innovate. Tom Mueller, a propulsion genius, was my first key hire. We set up shop in an old warehouse in El Segundo, California. The goal was simple and insane: build the Falcon 1, the first private liquid-fueled orbital rocket, and do it for a fraction of NASA's cost. I put $100 million of my own money into SpaceX. But as if trying to revolutionize space wasn't enough, I decided to kick another hornet's nest: the automotive industry. GM had just killed the EV1, their experimental electric car. They literally collected the cars and crushed them in the desert. Oil companies were smiling. The world consensus was electric cars are golf carts. They are slow, ugly, and have no range. I met a guy named JB Straubel. We had lunch together, and he told me about a new lithium-ion battery technology, the same batteries we used in laptops. "If we connect thousands of these cells," JB said, "we can have enough energy density for a sports car." That turned on a light bulb in my head. The problem with electric cars wasn't physics. It was the old lead-acid battery. With lithium-ion, we could make a fast car, and if the car is fast and sexy, people will want to buy it. Shortly after, I met Martin Eberhard and Mark Terpenning. They had founded a small company called Tesla Motors. They had the idea, but they didn't have the money. I jumped in. I invested $6.5 million in the Series A round and became chairman of the board. I wasn't the CEO yet, but I was the driving financial and strategic force. Tesla's master plan was simple but brilliant. I wrote it in a blog post in 2006. 1. Build an expensive, low-volume sports car, the Roadster. 2. Use that money to build a medium-volume, mid-priced sedan, the Model S. 3. Use that money to create an affordable high-volume car, the Model 3. 4. Provide solar energy. It looked logical on paper, but the execution was hell on earth. From 2002 to 2007, my life was a blur of stress. At SpaceX, we were blowing things up. Falcon 1 failed on the first launch, failed on the second. Millions of dollars turning into smoke and debris in the Pacific. The press laughed. The dot-com billionaire playing with rockets. At Tesla, things were even worse. The Roadster, our first car, was an engineering disaster. The chassis we licensed from Lotus didn't fit. The batteries caught fire. The transmission broke if you stepped on the gas. And the cost, my God, the cost. We promised to sell the car for $85,000, but it cost $200,000 to manufacture. I discovered that Tesla's original management was hiding the truth about the costs. I had to fire Martin Eberhard, the original founder. I took over as CEO in 2008, and then came 2008. If you think you had a bad year, let me tell you about 2008. It was the year the global financial system collapsed. Credit vanished. GM and Chrysler went bankrupt. And I was in the middle of the hurricane. I was divorcing Justine. The press covered every sordid detail. My children were small. SpaceX had failed the third launch of Falcon 1. I had money for just one more launch. If the fourth one failed, SpaceX was over. Tesla was bleeding money. We needed to close a funding round before Christmas, or the company would shut its doors. I had invested everything. My $180 million was gone. I was living off loans from friends to pay rent. I remember waking up in the middle of the night, my heart beating so hard it felt like it was going to crack my ribs. I had chronic stomach pains. I vomited from stress. I had to choose. I had a little money left, the last gasp of my fortune. I could put it all into SpaceX and let Tesla die, or put it all into Tesla and let SpaceX die, or split the money and run the very real risk of both dying. It was like having two children drowning and only having the strength to save one. I looked into the abyss and decided to jump. I split the money. I bet everything that was left. On September 28, 2008, Falcon 1 was on the launch pad on Kwajalein Island in the middle of the Pacific. It was the fourth attempt. It was all or nothing. 3, 2, 1. Liftoff. I was in mission control, holding my breath. The first stage burned, separation. The second stage ignited. The rocket kept climbing. And then orbit. We did it. A private company with 500 employees did what only national superpowers had done. I cried. Everyone cried. That success saved SpaceX. NASA gave us a $1.6 billion contract days before Christmas, but Tesla was still hanging by a thread. We were hours away from bankruptcy. I called everyone I knew. I invested my last pennies. I convinced investors to put in a little more. At 6 p.m. on Christmas Eve 2008, we closed the funding. Tesla survived by a matter of hours. I survived 2008, but I came out of it different. I wasn't the internet wunderkind anymore. I was a man who had stared at the end and come back. And now I had a mission: electrify the world and take humanity to Mars, whatever it takes. We survived 2008, but we didn't have time to breathe. Tesla had proved an electric car could be fast, the Roadster. But now we had to prove it could be practical, luxurious, and mass-produced. The goal was the Model S. I didn't want the Model S to just be a good electric car. I wanted it to be the best car ever made, period. Gas or electric. It needed to be safe, fast, beautiful, and have a giant screen on the dashboard, something no one had done before. I insisted on door handles that automatically retracted to improve aerodynamics. "Elon, the handles are freezing in winter, they won't open," the engineers complained. "Then fix it," I shouted. "They have to work. It's the first thing you touch. It has to be magical." We launched the Model S in 2012. It was a triumph. Motor Trend named it Car of the Year. Consumer Reports gave it a score so high it broke their scale, 99/100. Suddenly people stopped laughing. GM, Ford, and Toyota started looking at us with worry. We had reinvented the automobile. Meanwhile, at SpaceX, we were trying to do something that defied the logic of traditional physics: make a rocket come back and land softly. Everyone in the aerospace industry said it was impossible. Rockets are made to be disposable. You use it, it falls into the ocean, sinks, or burns up. It's like taking a Boeing 747, flying from New York to London, and when you get there, throwing the plane away. That's why flying is expensive. If we could reuse the rocket, the cost of access to space would drop 100-fold. We started with Grasshopper, a test rocket in Texas that went up a few meters and came down. It looked like a flying building. Then, We tried landing the first stage of the Falcon 9 on a barge in the middle of the ocean. We called these barges drone ships and named them after ships from Ian M. Banks' books, like Of Course I Still Love You. The first attempts were explosive. I remember watching the telemetry videos. The rocket came down from space, braked, hit the barge, and boom, tipped over, exploded. A spectacular fireball. The press called it a failure. I called it a rapid unscheduled disassembly. Each explosion taught us something. A hydraulic sensor that failed, a valve that froze. Until the night of December 21st, 2015 arrived, we decided to try the landing on solid ground at Cape Canaveral. I was in the control room, but I couldn't sit still. I was pacing back and forth. The Falcon 9 launched 11 satellites into orbit. Mission accomplished. Now the first stage was coming back. The sonic boom echoed across Florida. On the night video feed, we saw a bright light descending from the sky. "It's coming in too fast," someone whispered. The landing legs deployed. The Merlin engine lit for the final burn. Smoke covered everything. Silence in the room. When the smoke cleared, there it was. Standing. Motionless. Majestic. The control room exploded in screams. People were hugging, crying. I ran out of the room. For the first time in history, an orbital rocket had gone to space and come back in one piece. "Welcome back, baby," I said, looking at that tower of charred metal. In that moment, I knew Mars was possible. But my mind never stops. I have this pathological restlessness. In 2013, I got stuck in Los Angeles traffic. I hate traffic. It's a loss of life. I started thinking about tunnels and vacuum tubes. I published a white paper on the Hyperloop, a train in a vacuum tube that could go from Los Angeles to San Francisco in 30 minutes. I left the idea open for anyone who wanted to develop it because I was already too busy, and I was worried about artificial intelligence. I saw Google buying DeepMind. Larry Page is my friend, but he has an overly optimistic view of AI. He thinks if machines become super intelligent and replace us, it's just the next phase of evolution. Symmetry, that's not evolution, that's extinction. We debated many times late at night. We need a counterweight. AI cannot be controlled by a single profit-focused corporation. So I helped found OpenAI as a non-profit organization. The goal was to develop friendly open AI that would benefit all humanity. I invested millions, brought in Ilya Sutskever. Ironically, years later, I would step away from OpenAI due to disagreements over direction and the fact they became closed and for profit, but the seed was planted. I also founded Neuralink. If we can't beat AI, we have to join it. We need to increase the bandwidth between our cortex and our digital devices. A neural lace. Yes, chips in the brain. Sounds like Black Mirror, I know. But it's the only chance for human relevance in the long run. And in a moment of pure frustration with traffic, I created the Boring Company, literally. I bought a second-hand tunnel boring machine, put it in the SpaceX parking lot, and started digging a hole. "What are you doing?" employees asked. "Digging," I replied. "We sold hats and flamethrowers to fund the company." Yes, flamethrowers. We raised $10 million in days selling not a flamethrowers. Life can't just be about solving sad problems. There have to be fun things too. But while I was playing with flamethrowers, the perfect storm was brewing at Tesla. It was time for the Model 3. The Model 3 was the original master plan, the affordable car, the car for the masses. We had 500,000 pre-orders. People lined up at stores like it was an iPhone launch. There had never been anything like it in the history of the automotive industry. The problem? We didn't know how to manufacture 5,000 cars a week. The Fremont factory in California turned into a war zone. I tried to automate everything. I bought incredibly expensive robots. The alien dreadnought I called the ideal factory. It was a terrible mistake. The robots were slow. They couldn't grab soft wires and connect them. Excessive automation was killing production. In 2017 and 2018, I entered what I call production hell. I moved into the factory, literally. I didn't go home. I slept on a couch in the conference room. When the couch got uncomfortable, I started sleeping on the floor under my desk so that when the team arrived or left their shift, they would see that their leader was there, suffering more than them. I wore the same clothes for 3 days. I smelled like sweat and industrial dust. It was my 47th birthday. I spent 24 full hours in the factory, working on welding stations, fixing robots, shouting, crying. "Elon, you need to sleep," my assistant said, worried about my sanity. "If I go to sleep, the company dies," I snarled. We were burning cash at a hallucinatory speed. Tesla was weeks away from bankruptcy again. Short sellers, investors betting on the stock dropping, were attacking us, spreading rumors, trying to destroy us. I developed a visceral hatred for these people who profit from the failure of others. In an act of desperation and improvised engineering, we built an entire assembly line inside a giant tent in the parking lot. We used scrap metal, ingenuity, and brute force, and it worked. We started hitting targets, but my brain was frying. The lack of sleep and the use of Ambien to try to switch off my brain at night started to take their toll. I became erratic on Twitter. Twitter was my escape valve, my direct megaphone to the people, without the filter of traditional media. In August 2018, I was driving to the airport and typed a tweet that would cost me $40 million and the chairmanship of Tesla. I am considering taking Tesla private at $420. Funding secured. I rounded the price up to $420 because, well, it seemed like a number with good karma, a reference to weed culture, and I thought my girlfriend at the time, the singer Grimes, would find it funny. It wasn't funny to the SEC. They sued me for fraud. They said I didn't have funding secured. I had talks with the Saudi sovereign fund, but nothing signed on paper. I had to settle. I paid a $20 million fine. Tesla paid another 20, and I had to step down as chairman for 3 years. The year 2018 was a personal nightmare. There was the cave episode in Thailand, where I called a British diver a pedo guy on Twitter because he insulted my mini-submarine. It was stupid. It was childish. I was under extreme pressure and I lashed out. And then I went on the Joe Rogan podcast. We talked for 2.5 hours about the universe, AI, watches, love. And at the end he lit a joint mixed with tobacco. That's legal in California, right? I asked. Totally legal, he said. So I'll take a puff. I took a single puff. I didn't inhale right, didn't even feel anything, but the image of Elon Musk smoking weed broke the internet. Tesla stock plummeted the next day. NASA opened a safety investigation into SpaceX because we are federal contractors. My friends called me, "Have you lost your mind? You're going to lose everything." I felt misunderstood. I was giving my blood, my soul, my sanity to accelerate the transition to sustainable energy and make humanity multiplanetary. And the world was focused on a tweet or a puff on a podcast. The pain was excruciating. In an interview with the New York Times, I broke down. I confessed I was exhausted, that it had been the hardest and most painful year of my career. But in the middle of the chaos, something happened. The production line in the tent worked. We started delivering the Model 3 in volume. The car was amazing. Customers loved it. Money started coming in. For the first time in years, Tesla started making a real profit. In late 2019, I announced something that looked like it came out of a dystopian sci-fi movie, the Cybertruck. I got on stage, a stainless steel triangle, armored glass. "Throw the metal ball at the glass, Franz," I told my chief designer. Crack! The glass broke. An awkward silence in the audience. "Well," I stammered, "try the other one." Crack! It broke again. "At least it didn't go through," I joked, laughing nervously. The world laughed. "It's the ugliest car in the world," they said. "It looks like a drawing by a 5-year-old. But I knew automotive design had been stagnant for 50 years. All cars looked the same. The Cybertruck was brutal, angular, indestructible. It was the future. We received 250,000 orders in a few days. We reached 2020. The global pandemic hit the world. Factories closed. The world stopped. But for me, stopping wasn't an option. I defied closure orders in California. I sued Alameda County. "I will be on the production line," I announced. "If anyone has to be arrested, I ask that it only be me." I was criticized again, called irresponsible, but I saw the economy collapsing and felt we needed to keep producing. And that was when, in the middle of the pandemic, market madness happened. Tesla stock started to rise and rise and rise. In January 2020, Tesla was worth $100 billion. In January 2021, it was worth $800 billion. Suddenly, I wasn't just the rocket and car guy. I passed Warren Buffett. I passed Bill Gates. And on a Thursday morning, I passed Jeff Bezos. I was the richest man in the world. I looked at the number on the screen, $185 billion. My reaction on Twitter was simple. How strange. Well, back to work. Because the money didn't change the mission. The mission was Mars. The mission was the light of consciousness, and I was about to make a decision that would put my reputation and my sanity to the test again. I was looking at my phone, at that little blue bird app, and thinking, this needs to be fixed. We reached 2022. I had rockets landing, electric cars dominating the world, and an incalculable fortune. But something bothered me deeply. I looked at public discourse and saw a disease. I call it the woke mind virus. It might sound harsh, I know, but let me explain. I saw this virus infect culture, the media, and painfully my own family. My eldest child, Xavier, who later changed names to Vivian, cut ties with me. She became a fervent communist and came to believe that anyone rich is evil incarnate. I tried to talk. I tried to understand, but the ideology consumed her. Losing contact with her was the most painful thing in my life since the death of my firstborn, Nevada. I felt that social media platforms, especially Twitter, were amplifying this division. Twitter was humanity's town square. It was where news happened, where debates took place, but it was being controlled by a small group of people in San Francisco who censored dissenting voices, banned jokes, and imposed a single worldview. Free speech isn't just about saying nice things. Free speech only exists if you allow someone you don't like to say something you don't like. If we lose that, we lose democracy. So I started buying Twitter stock. Initially, I thought about just joining the board, but I realized the problem was structural. The code was a black box. The company culture was one of complacency. Employees worked little and earned a lot, focused more on identity politics than software engineering. In April 2022, I made the offer, $44 billion. Was it madness? Financially, maybe. I overpaid. I tried to back out when I discovered the absurd amount of bots and fake accounts on the platform, but the lawyers told me I had signed a binding contract. I had to buy it. So I decided to enter with style. On October 26, 2022, I walked into Twitter HQ carrying a white porcelain bathroom sink. I posted the photo with the caption, "Entering Twitter HQ, let that sink in." It was a joke, sure, but the message was serious. Everything was going to change. That night, I fired CEO Parag Agrawal and the CFO. I sent them out of the building immediately. In the following days, I discovered a bloated company. There were managers managing managers who managed no one. There were entire teams dedicated to content moderation, acting like the thought police. I made the hardest decision of my executive career. I fired about 80% of the workforce. "Elon, the site goes down," critics screamed. "Twitter will die in 24 hours. It didn't die. In fact, it got faster. I sent an email to those who remained. The subject was, "A fork in the road." To build Twitter 2.0, we will need to be extremely hardcore. This will mean working long hours at high intensity. Only exceptional performance will constitute a passing grade. If you want to be part of this, click yes on the link below. Many left. Those who stayed were the fighters, the pirates. We turned the office into dorms. We slept there again, like in the old Zip2 days. I released the Twitter files, exposing how the old management collaborated with the government to censor information about COVID-19 and political scandals. I restored banned accounts, including Donald Trump's and satire sites like the Babylon Bee. I rebranded the company to X. X has always been my favorite letter. X.com, SpaceX, Model X, my son X, XEA12. The plan is to turn X into the everything app. Payments, video calls, news, artificial intelligence, like WeChat in China, but focused on freedom and truth. It was a brutal period. I was attacked by the media day and night. Advertisers fled, pressured by activist groups. I lost billions in revenue. My public image shifted from tech genius to right-wing villain, but I don't care what the media says. I care about reality. And the reality is that X is now the only platform where you can see what is actually happening in the world without corporate filters. While I fought in the mud of cultural politics, my eyes were still turned to the stars. In South Texas, in a place called Boca Chica, we built Starbase. There, we erected the monster, Starship. It is the largest flying object ever built by humanity, taller than the Saturn V that went to the moon. It has twice the power, and it is fully reusable. It's made of stainless steel, like kitchen pots, because it's cheap and heat-resistant. The first orbital test flight in April 2023 was spectacular. The rocket went up, spun, and exploded. The media. Elon Musk fails again. Rocket explodes. Us at SpaceX. Success. The rocket cleared the pad and didn't destroy the launch tower. We learned a lot. That is the difference in mindset. Failure is data. If you aren't failing, you aren't innovating enough. On the second flight, we went further. On the third, we reached space, and on the fourth flight, we managed to land the booster in the ocean with centimeter precision. The ultimate goal is insane. I want to catch the giant rocket back at the launch tower. Using mechanical arms we call Mechazilla, we were successful at this recently, a scene that looks like CGI but is pure physics. Starship is Noah's Ark. If something happens to Earth, a meteor, a nuclear war, a supervirus, or simply demographic collapse, which is a real risk, stop being afraid to have kids. Humanity needs a second home. Mars is that home. I want to see a self-sustaining city on Mars before I die. I don't just want to visit it. I want humanity to be multi-planetary. And to ensure the future is good, we need to solve artificial intelligence. I founded xAI to compete with OpenAI and Google. We launched Grok, an AI that has personality, a sense of humor, and crucially, seeks the maximum truth without fear of offending political sensibilities. An AI that lies to avoid offending is dangerous. If it is programmed to prioritize diversity over truth, what happens when it has to make life or death decisions? In parallel, Neuralink advanced. In 2024, we implanted the first chip in a human being, Noland Arbor, a quadriplegic. Seeing Noland playing chess in Civilization 6 with just his mind, controlling the computer cursor by telepathy, made me cry. That is magic. That is giving back dignity and human agency. In the future, we could cure blindness, paralysis, and maybe merge our consciousness with AI so we don't become obsolete. And of course, there is Optimus, the Tesla humanoid robot. People laughed when I presented a dancer in a robot suit at the first AI Day. It's a fake. they said. 2 years later, Optimus is folding clothes, handling eggs without breaking them, and walking around the factory. In the future, physical labor will be a choice. Robots will do the dangerous and repetitive work. The economy will become infinite. Today, I sit here and look back. I see a boy who got beaten up at school in South Africa. I see a young immigrant cleaning boilers in Canada. I see a programmer sleeping under his desk. I see a man who almost lost everything in 2008. Did I make mistakes? Thousands. Did I say stupid things? For sure. Did I hurt people I loved? Unfortunately, yes. My dedication to the mission demands a personal sacrifice I don't wish on anyone. It's not fun being me. My mind is a constant storm. There is no silence in there, ever. Many ask, why don't you stop? You have $250 billion. Buy an island. They don't understand. It was never about the money. I don't have luxury houses. I sold almost all of them. I live in a $50,000 modular house in Boca Chica, near my rockets. I do this because I love humanity. I love the irony, the drama, the comedy, and the tragedy of the human experience. I want us to wake up in the morning, excited about the future. I want us to look at the sky and think that we are going to be out there, among the stars, and not just trapped down here fighting over resources and petty ideologies. I want to protect the light of consciousness. The universe is vast, cold, and dead. As far as we know, we are the only candle lit in the darkness, and that candle is fragile. My life is dedicated to protecting that flame, whether by making Earth sustainable with Tesla, taking that flame to Mars with SpaceX, or protecting the freedom to speak the truth on X. If I have to be the villain in some people's story, to be the hero in humanity's story, I accept that burden. The future is going to be strange. It's going to be fast. It's going to be amazing. And I promise you, it won't be boring. This was my story, so far. Because actually, we are just getting started. I hope this journey through my life has sparked something in you. If you believe in a future where humanity reaches the stars and where technology serves to set us free, join us. Please smash that like button if this made you think. Subscribe to the channel to follow the next stories of great visionaries. Thanks for listening. Keep your eyes on the horizon. Until next time.